Hey guys, this video is solely on reading EKGs. And for those of you who are new to reading 12 lead ECGs, this this is the pretty much the bare bones of simply looking for STEMIs. This video is not about bundle branch blocks. It's not about rhythms, rates. That's it. And I'm not going into measurements. This is simply about finding STEMIs. And for those of you who are about to take National Registry, this is probably the most paramount part for taking that exam. When they show you a 12 lead ECG, for the most part, they're going to be asking you, is there STEMI or not? And you have to be able to find the J point, find the ST segment elevation or depression, and you have to be able to say where the STEMI is located. So that's what this video is about. And that's it. So let's get started. The first thing is geographical locations, right? And I don't care if you use ISAL, SALI, it doesn't matter. As long as when you look at these EKGs and you're searching for STEMIs, that you do it consistently. Okay? Don't just globally look at the entire EKG and go, I hope something will stick out to me. You don't want to do that, especially if you're new to this. Figure out your routine, and then go from there and break it down one piece at a time. Okay? So say, for example, we're going to use Sally, right? That's pretty much the most common one. It's probably the oldest one. But let's say, for example, we're going to do V1 and V2, right? And that would be S, okay? That's the septum of the heart. And then we could go to V3 and V4, right? And that would be A, that's anterior, okay? So obviously anterior, that's the front of the heart. And honestly, it's a little bit shifted to the left. Okay, so that's like LAD area, left anterior descending. And then we can go into lateral. So the first one you should look at is V5 and V6, and that is actually low lateral. Okay, so that's more towards the apex, right? If you were to actually draw the heart here, oops, sorry about that, draw the heart here, and you were to put, let's say, for example, the left coronary artery, right? And I'm not going to differentiate between the circumflex or the LAD, but let's just say we're kind of looking at the left side here. V5 and V6 would be down here, right? This would be a low lateral, okay? And then we'd come to high lateral, which is 1 in AVL, right? And that's up here. 1 would be here, and we'd see AVL up here, right? And these guys are looking in like this, right? Looking in. So that's that. So 1 in AVL. And then, of course, probably the most popular is 2-3 in AVF. Okay, that's what they call inferior wall, right? So that's down here, but that's looking upright, and that's looking lower down onto the right coronary artery. Okay, so 2-3 in AVF, that is your inferior wall, right? And if you have elevation in here or depression, it doesn't matter, elevation or depression in here, this is the time where you would take V4 from here, because that's actually placed here, and you'd move it over here to the right side, not the left side, in that intercostal space. So that's your V4R. And that actually looks higher up on the right coronary artery to confirm that you have right ventricular involvement. All right, so it's like I said, I don't care how you break it down, doesn't matter, as long as you do it consistently, right? If you look septum first, anterior first, I don't care. Some people like to look at inferior wall first and then anterior. It doesn't matter. Just as long as you do it consistently and you break it down and you know where you're looking at. Okay. Now the other thing that I see people struggle on probably the most is finding the elevation or depression. Like I see people look at it and they're like, oh yeah, that's elevation. It's not elevation at all. Um, when you look at a cardiac complex, okay, you're going to see a couple of baselines, right? These isoelectric lines, the segments here, PR segment or intervals. It's actually interval. These are intervals. These flat parts, these dictate baseline. So if the ST segment is above baseline, it's elevation. If it's below baseline, it's depression. Okay? So how do you know where baseline is? Well, there's a bunch of answers to this. You could find the calibration box and go, okay, well, calibration box sits on baseline. A lot of people like to go off of this right here would actually be the PR segment, right? People like to look here and they go, okay, well, this is baseline, and they're right. This is actually a pretty decent way. Or you could look at, I'm sorry, like right here at this PR segment. A lot of people like to look at that. That's this guy right here, and that's baseline. And then you would compare this guy right here. This is known as your J point. Okay, the J point, by definition, is where the QRS complex terminates into this guy, the T wave. Okay, so where is the J point? And that will tell you if it's elevated or depressed. I think a much better way to attack this problem, because bouncing down the road in an ambulance, um, the isoelectric line can move, right? It can get thrown off, because remember, it's just reading electrical signals, so it can get messed up. There's other things like interference and things like that. So I've always found that it's a lot easier if just go to your T wave. Look at your T wave, because it's an ST segment elevation or depression. So solely look at the T wave. Go here to the back side of the T wave and look at this point. This is always on baseline. I promise you, always on baseline. And it's very easy to find. There are other things that you haven't gotten into yet. There is actually things like PR elevation and and depression, and strain patterns and things like that, that can actually throw this off. But what I promise you is always on baseline is this guy right here, the backside of your T wave. And just compare the two. Is If this is baseline, then you go to the front side of your T wave, right? Look at this guy right here, because this is your segment, this line. Is this line above it or below it? So if, for example, look at here, look at the ST segment elevation. Look at this guy. Go to the back of the T wave right here. Okay, that's baseline. Now go to the front. Where does the QRS terminate into the T? Well, let's say it terminates right here. Now simply draw a line, and you can go, look at that. It is clearly elevated. Or say, for example, go to the ST depression. All right, here's my T wave. Go to the back side of the T wave. This is my point right here. Okay, now where does the QRS terminate? Well, it terminates right here into the T wave. Draw it. Look at that. That's a clear line of depression. And I promise you, if you attack it this way, it will make your life a lot easier. So let's look at some examples. Okay? So first thing, we'll go to V1 and V2. Okay? Here's my T wave right here. Okay? So you can look at this and go, here, let me highlight just so you can see. All right, let me go to this guy. Well, I'm going to highlight this guy, right? That's your T wave, okay? And then we'll go, like, this is the back. This is the front, okay? And that's pretty flat, like no problem here. Same thing, let's go to V2, right? So we're going to knock septal out. There's a T wave, right? All right, now let's go, well, this is the back, and this is the front. Pretty flat, no big deal. V3, so you go to anterior, right? So that's septal, and we'll go to anterior, all right? It's V3 and V4. Again, pretty flat, no big deal. V5, V6, right? I'll highlight them just so you can see, right? pretty flat, no big deal. Pretty flat, no big deal. So V5 and V6, remember that is going to be, this is going to be low lateral. Now we'll check out high lateral. Come up here. Huh? So pretty flat, no big deal. That's one. Let's look at AVL. Okay, pretty flat, no big deal. Then we'll go to 2, 3 in AVF, right? So this is going to be your inferior 2, 3 in AVF. Because remember, 1 in AVL, that's high lateral. So we'll just put high lateral. Okay, and so 2, 3 in AVF. Okay, look at these guys. So here you have, this is your T wave. Let me just bring out the T wave in lead 3. Lead 2 looks okay. That's pretty flat, right? It's pretty flat. This guy right here, that's your T wave. Look at your T waves here. They're inverted. Okay, so that could be significant. That could be signs of ischemia. And then AVF, no big deal. They just have little T waves, man. Look at them. It's just low voltage, man. It's no big deal. Okay, so here's your T wave. This is P, QRS, T. That's one cardiac complex, right? Here's another complex, right? So again, this is a T wave. It's pretty flat. So all in all, this EKG is pretty non-diagnostic. It's no big deal. The only thing that might be noteworthy is the inverted T's in lead 3. I would probably do a V4R just to look at it. But honestly, it's really no big deal, non-diagnostic. So let's move on. Let's check out another one. Okay, so here we go, right? V1, V2, right? That's septal. So look, it's kind of messy here, but let's break it apart. Okay, this is one cardiac complex. So there's your P wave, QRS, T. V1 is inverted, which is not rare. A lot of times V1 is inverted. That's very common. That's just how, again, it's how the electricity is flowing. That lead just picks it up upside down. No big deal. Yeah, no big deal. So, again, pretty clean. This is the T wave. You actually have here to here. So that's a little slanted, possibly a little elevation in one. Look at V2 though. So V2, and again, I'm not going into bundle branch blocks, so we're not going to go down that road today. But this is a P wave right here. This is a QRS. And this is a T wave. This is the T right here. Okay? So let's look at this next complex. Remember, go to your T wave first. This is the back side of it. So that's baseline. Now go to the front. Where does the QRS terminate into the T wave? Right here. Right there. So check that out. Is that depression or elevation or what? Exactly. You have ST segment elevation. Okay, V3, kind of the same deal. That's baseline. Where does it terminate? Right there. So you got several millimeters. V3. Yep, so V3 is also elevated. How about V4? Baseline. QRS terminates. That's pretty close, guys. That is... No, I don't believe so. So I think V4 is good. V5 is good. V6 is good. So right now you're looking at, you have elevation in the anterior and the septal, but nothing in lateral. And then we'll go high lateral, 1 in ABO. So again, look at this T wave. Looks pretty flat. This T wave, not bad, right? Remember, there's the back. There's the termination. So again, no big deal. So high lateral looks okay. Let's go to 2-3 ABF. 2, no big deal. Look at this T wave, beautiful. Inverted in 3 again, but that might be ischemia, it's hard to say. And then ABF. Again, here's your P. Here's let's look at a whole complex. Here's your, all right, that's P wave, QRS, T wave, looks pretty flat, okay? So I think we could say that you have elevation in the anterior and septal, and that's what you'll call this, an anterior septal MI. Let's go to another one. Oh yeah. The first thing that should pop out to you about this one is it's kind of slow, which is actually kind of significant. I'll tell you why in a minute. But first thing, let's go to V1, V2. Yeah, look at this guy. Okay, inverted, right? V2 is not inverted, V1 is. It's deceptive, okay? So this is one cardiac complex, right? This is a second cardiac complex. So there's your P. Let me get my little highlighter out. Right. Oh, not that guy. This guy. So P, QRS, T. T actually looks pretty good because if you go baseline, termination, like that's pretty flat. And then you go to V2, right? So we're in the septum. V2, look at this. This is one whole cardiac complex right here. Okay, so P wave, this is QRS. This is where it terminates. This is baseline. Look at this. Boom. Significant depression. Significant depression. You go to V3 and V4. A little bit of ST segment depression. Okay. V3, same, a little bit of ST depression. Okay, how about we go to lateral? No, that actually looks pretty good. V5, V6. I got this stupid thing in my way, sorry. This guy and this guy. Okay. High lateral though, look at this. This is baseline. This is one whole complex. This is baseline. P, QRS. This is the front of the T wave. Depression. Depression. Now look at 2, 3 and ABF. Inferior wall, right? This is what sticks out. Okay, this is one whole complex. This is your QRS right here. Okay, so this is T wave, and this is T wave. But you see how very pointy they are? This is actually hyperacute T waves. But 2 actually doesn't have a ton of elevation, it only has a millimeter, it just looks huge. But then you go into lead 3, this is termination right here. And boom, this is baseline. So significant elevation here, significant elevation, right? I'm sorry, look at AVL too. AVL, huge depression, okay? But this is actually not depression right here. My eraser here. Yeah, making a mess here. This is actually not depression. This is actually what you call a reciprocal change to all this elevation up here in 2, 3 and AVF, which confirms that you have infarction. Okay, so yep, elevation, elevation, which is crazy because these are so big, but this is only like 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 millimeters of elevation, which is still significant. I'm not saying it's not, but they're just so pronounced. What's cool to note about the rate, like let's say for example, excuse me, let's say for example, you mark it from here to here, like let's say that's your 6-second strip. You could count through complexes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So the heart rate here is probably around 50. And That's 2, 3 and AVF is the right coronary artery. That's the inferior wall, which is fed by the right coronary artery. 90% of the population's electrical system is perfused. And what I mean by electrical systems, I mean that the SA node and AV node are perfused by the right coronary artery. 90% of the population. Which, if you think about it, if that became infarcted or even ischemic, it could mess with the electrical system, hence mess with the rate. And this will commonly show you bradycardia or even heart blocks. So, all right, let's move on. But this would be an inferior wall MI. All right, let's break it down. V1, cool. V2, all right. Let's go again. This is inverted. Okay. I'm pretty sure we already saw this one, guys. Look at this. Boom. J points right here. So elevation in V2, elevation in V2. V3 still has the elevation. Okay. The baseline right here. Termination here, so only like a millimeter here. So you have elevation in septal. You have a little bit of elevation anterior. And then V4 looks okay. V5 and V6, right? Remember that is going to be low lateral. Okay. I'm just going to highlight it. All right, so that looks pretty good. That looks pretty flat. Let's go to 1 in AVL. All right. Looks pretty flat. That looks pretty flat. So pretty good there. And then 2, 3, and AVF. So that's a T-wave. Looks pretty flat. Oh yeah, we did look at this one already. Inverted in 3. A little bit off. But 2, 3, and AVF look pretty good. So that would label this guy a septal, or I'm sorry, anterior septal MI. If you ever wondered like how you label these things, like why isn't it a septal anterior, or why does it have to be anterior septal? Because the College of Cardiac Surgeons a long time ago said, well, we're going to label them all the worst to the least worst. And they said that inferior and anterior are the worst STEMIs to get. So you're going to label them all with the worst. So if it's an anterior, this is an anterior septal. If it was like an inferior and a lateral, it wouldn't be a lateral inferior. It would be an inferior lateral. So that's where that came from. All right, let's go to, V1 and V2. We'll go to septum again. Okay. Oh man, you get significant changes here. So let's look at one complex. Right? Let's look at this complex. And then we'll go, look, this is baseline. Right? QRS. This is my J, this is termination, right guys? It's like right here. Here, I'll do it over here. This is termination right here. Significant depression. Huge depression. Look at that. Boom. Boom. Huge depression in V1 and V2. Same in V3. Huge depression there. Again, V4 still has it. Right? And then you get into the lateral wall. Look at this. Now we're getting into elevation. So again, I'll highlight a complex. Let me highlight a complex here. This is your QRS. This is your P wave. T wave right here. Okay. Now we'll go baseline, J point, elevation. Look at that. A couple millimeters right there. Same deal here, guys. Baseline, termination of the QRS. This is elevation. So elevation in the lateral wall. Let's check high lateral, which is 1 in AVL. Very good. Okay, let's highlight a complex so you can see. It's one full complex. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing in AVL. AVL has very low amplitude, so it's kind of hard to see. Okay, there's your P wave, there's your QRS, and there's your T wave. That's one cardiac complex. Okay, your P wave, excuse me, is very buried up onto your QRS, so you get a short interval there. Honestly, that could be lead placement or just the amplitude. I doubt you have like an accessory pathway. Okay, so let's click on this guy and go. There's his baseline, right? That's termination. So you have a little bit of elevation here. Baseline, termination, a little bit of elevation. Oh, that's 2, excuse me. So a sum in 1, AVL looks okay. And then we'll go 2, 3 in AVF, right? Highlight that. So this is the inferior wall right here. Okay. So we said there's elevation in lead 2. Okay. Little elevation in lead 3 and AVF. AVF is really hard to read. It's hard to break apart. So let's break it apart. Okay, let's look at there's 2 complexes right here. P wave, QRS, your T is here. In fact, they become almost 1. Okay, but it doesn't matter because this is your J point, this is baseline. See the line? So definite elevation there. So we have elevation in lateral and inferior. So this would be an inferior lateral. Okay. Let's move on. Oh, here's a good one. Let's break this apart. Okay, so again, we'll go V1, V2, septal first. Okay. V1's actually, again, pretty hard to break apart. But if you look at what's going on in 2, V1 kind of makes more sense. So here's your QRS, right? So in case you didn't know, there has to be a T wave. You're never going to come across a lead that doesn't have a T wave because repolarization processes take time. There's always a T wave. Count on it. P waves can disappear. QRSs can kind of disappear. Only because of just damage or amplitude, but T waves are always there. So if this is baseline and there's a J point in here somewhere, then guess what, guys? That is elevation. Okay, elevation. Same here. Like, look, baseline. Look at this QRS. This QRS comes all the way up and then hooks right here, here, and here. But you see what I mean? Like, if you were to base your PR interval on this, you'd be like, wow, it's like 5 millimeters. It's not. It's not. Look, go to your J point, which is here, and then T wave here. So it's still a lot, man. It's like, it actually is probably like 5 millimeters. It's huge. Yeah, it's actually pretty significant. This is just, yeah, forget about this guy. Look at this. It's hard to see. 1, 2, 3, 4 millimeters, I believe. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4 millimeters of elevation. There you go. So definitely septal. Anterior, look, it's off depression. Boom. Boom. Baseline, J point. Depression. So you have septal infarction, but not anterior. That's very peculiar. Excuse me. That is very peculiar. Again, you go look at lateral depression, and high lateral though. Look at this. You have elevation. Boom. One is a train wreck. It's hard to break that apart. So we're actually going to leave that guy alone. AVL is definitely clear elevation though. So lateral elevation. And then 2, 3 in AVF. Let's inferior wall. This is again hard to break apart, right? So let me highlight a complex. Boom. QRS is here, right? And this is our T wave here. Okay. So let's go QRS, QRS, baseline, T wave. Actually, this is J point here. So you have huge, huge depression. Okay, again, this is deceiving because look, you could think like this whole thing could be an S wave. You're right. If this was the only thing I had to look at, like I might actually believe that. Like here, this is a T wave. This whole thing is S, which happens in bundle branch blocks. And then you could go lead 3, right? But look at the other complexes that are cleaner. Like that's just not a thing. This is baseline. This is your T. All right. If there was a hump here, then I would be like, this is an RSR. Like this is just a bundle branch block, but it's not. There's a clear baseline and a T wave. This is J point. So this is depression, depression, depression. So elevation here, elevation septal and septal, which is really peculiar to not have elevation in the anterior. I actually look at this guy. If you look at AVR, and I know nobody ever talks about AVR, but you have elevation in AVR, and it's actually significant, which tells me that elevation in AVR and huge ischemic patterns everywhere else tells me that you have either ischemia or infarction in the subendocardial wall. That's probably right at the left main coronary artery. That's kind of getting deep into it, but that's one of the cool things about AVR. Like when you guys get beyond scratching the surface of EKGs, like AVR is something to take very seriously. All right, so check this out. Let's go to, we got V1 right here. Yep, V1. We got V2, so let's look at that. Man, this is actually a pretty neat complex because if you look at this rhythm, like it looks like VTAC. If I saw this going across my screen over 100 beats a minute, I would probably more than 100, but 160, 170, I'd be like, this is VTAC. But let's break it apart, right? So QRS, T wave, QRS, T wave. So let's find, like, this is baseline. Where's our J point? It has to be here. Huge elevation. Baseline, J point. Where, like, it has to be here. Baseline, J point. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. Baseline, J point. Right? So you have huge elevation, monstrous elevation here. So absolutely elevation in the septum. Again, anterior. Right? You can't even make it out in lateral. So lateral, yes. And then lead 3 again is inverted. Depression, depression. So you are looking at this is a true widowmaker. Like this is a left main coronary artery infarction. You have, it's down, up, so huge left axis deviation. Like, yeah, this is a huge infarction. But anyways, you have it lateral, septal, anterior, inferior is reciprocal. Yeah, this is a high up. So what I'm saying is, like, if you look at the heart here, all right, let's break it down. That means that because if the left main comes out and then it breaks off into the circumflex and then goes into the LAD, the left anterior descending, right? if I say it's in the left coronary artery, that means it's all the way up here, which means it's infarcting literally over 50%, okay, which makes this what they call a widowmaker. So let's go to another one here. All right, so let's go to V1 and V2. Yep. Okay, so let's look at this complex. Okay, so we have termination right there. See, it's a little depressed, a little bit. Right, a little ST segment depression. Again, this is baseline. Right, QRS turn. So this whole thing is the T right here, which means this is your J point right here. J point, baseline. J point, baseline. So definitely depressed in here as well, here as well, here as well. And then 5 and 6 is low lateral. 5 looks good. Let me just highlight a complex so you can see it. So P wave, QRS, and then T. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then you go into 6. 6 definitely has changes. Okay, so let me highlight one complex here. Cardiac complex, good. Very good. So baseline, J point, and you can see it. Elevation, you have ST elevation and lateral, and then go high lateral, boom. You got more depression. This is a complex. ST segment depression. 1, and then AVL, right? High lateral. Again, huge depression. Now let's check out the bottom. 2, 3 AVF, inferior wall. So 2, 3 AVF. Okay. Look at this. P wave, QRS. So this J point, baseline. Huge elevation, huge elevation, elevation, J point, baseline. So elevation in 3. Baseline, or J point, baseline, elevation. So definitely an inferior wall MI. So here this is one of those cases where you would have to do a V4R to see if you have right ventricular involvement, which is going to dictate if that patient is preload dependent. Okay, if they are preload dependent, you cannot give them nitroglycerin. Absolutely contraindicated. Okay, so so I had some in 6, right? So you could be like, oh, it is some lateral, but if you think about like why would it be in 6 and 2, 3 and AVF? That's weird. This is the right, this is the left. Well, it's actually at the apex. So if you draw the heart, right? Draw this guy out, right? You would have 3 AVF, 2, 6 is like right here. So essentially the STEMI is on the bottom. Yeah, but it's at the apex, right? And I know apex is another term for the top, which is also weird because the top of the heart is also called the base. So this thing is flipped upside down. But it's not a stretch to say that 2, 3 and AVF, 1, 2, 3 is really close to V6. So kind of makes sense. It's just kind of, you got to think, guys, the heart is not a piece of paper. It's a ball, right? So it's a 3-dimensional thing to look at. So this would be an inferior lateral MI. Okay, let's look at another one. Highlighter here. Let's go to V1 and V2, septum. Okay, highlight one full complex. The V1 looks all right. It's actually upright this time. How about that? Okay. 2, 3 and AV. So let's go to V2. V2, look at this. Elevated or depressed? Huh? Right, you go baseline, J point. So elevation in V2. Okay, V4. I'm sorry, so V3 and V4. This would be anterior. So again, look at that. Same deal, guys. Huge elevation. V4, huge elevation. Again, how do I know? Gotta find the J point. Baseline, J point. Baseline, J point. This is where the QRS terminates. By termination, how do I know that? Because the QRS comes up. Where's the first change of direction into the new wave? It's here. That is your J point. That is considered termination. So elevation in V2, V3, V4. Now let's look at the lateral leads. Let's go low lateral, V5, V6. All right, look at one full complex. One full complex. Okay. V5, baseline, J point. Baseline, change of direction right here, guys, J point. So you have elevation in V5, in V6. Let's go high lateral, right, which is 1 in AVL. Okay, boom. Look at that guy. Elevation. Boom. Elevation. Okay. So you have, oh, I need this guy. Elevation, elevation. How about inferior wall? Looks good. Up, depression. Up, depression. So this is actually not depression. This is going to be reciprocal changes, which is something, again, I'm not going to get into today. We're just looking for STEMIs. That's it. So here I have elevation in septal, anterior, and lateral, right? So according to the cardiologist, what's the worst one? Anterior is. I'm not even going to add septum into this. And lateral. This is an anterior lateral STEMI. Okay. Again, honestly, to see just a septal MI is very rare because the septum is mainly just little feeder arteries that are fed off of the anterior. So anterior and septum, they usually go together. All right, let's look at another one. Okay, we're going to speed this up a little bit here, guys, because I don't want this video to be an hour. Okay, V1 and V2. Okay, V1 and V2. Cool. This is not inverted. Very impressive. Okay, so just to highlight your T wave, it is, oh, your T wave is right there. So again, baseline, J point. Oh man, you might have a smidge there, but not really noteworthy. Nothing in V2. J point, maybe a smidge depression, but not really noteworthy. Smidge depression. No, it looks pretty good. I have pretty much a rule of thumb here, guys. If you have to bust out your magnifying glass, you're wasting your time. These are good machines, but they're not that precise. Boom, boom, maybe a little depression. Yeah, lead one. AVL, I think AVL is starting to get that shape. This is a shape I don't like. This is where you start to see that convex or concave shapes. Those are the ones you got to watch out for. So a little, this baseline, boom, boom, a little depression, and then 2-3 in AVF. No, oh yeah, right there. You got elevation. Oh wait, your baseline's off. So that's pretty close, but 3 you definitely have it. You have a 1 or 2 millimeters there. AVF, 1 or 2 millimeters there. So this is an inferior wall, without a doubt, which means you have to run a V4R. Must run a V4R. All right, cool. Let's look at another one. Oh, yeah, this is definitely a bundle branch block, which, again, I'm not going to get into that today. We're just going to kind of look at this guy, and I'm going to go, okay, this is QRS, T-wave. It's actually pretty level, guys. Pretty level. Okay. These can be tricky because this is a right bundle branch block, and they get into RSR waves and R primes, and so like this is probably not depressed. It just presents that way. But again, I'm not going to get into this today. This is your front. Like this is V3 looks okay. So V1 looks okay. V2. I mean, these are reading out because this is technically your guy. So reading out a little depressed. So V3 looks good. This is your T wave. This is your J point. So V4 good. V5 looks good. This is a huge, excuse me. What I like about V6, just pay attention to this one part because this confuses people, is your QRS complex here wide? So a lot of people, they just look at that and they go, no, it's not wide. That's not your QRS. That's your R. Your S is this whole thing. So is this thing wide? Yeah, this thing's huge. This is the beginning of your QRS. This is the end. Okay? That thing's humongously wide. So like if you look at lead 1, is this wide or narrow? Right? QRS, QRS, QRS. Like this is the end. This is where it ends. This is huge. Like that's the end. That's the beginnings. This whole thing is an S wave. Like, that thing is monstrous. All right. Let's move on. Okay. Again, this is a left bundle branch block, but we're not going to get into that. In fact, I'm going to skip this because you can't find STEMIs in left bundle branch blocks. Let's move on. Oh, this is an EKG from. This is. Excuse me. This is one of the main reasons you don't ever give cardizome to somebody with an accessory pathway, because this is what you get. Okay, here we go. Let's look at this guy. Again, slow, which usually indicates this is a problem with the right coronary artery. So look at V1, look at V2. Okay. And by the way, reading this stuff is horrendously inaccurate. There are some things that are very inaccurate, but most of it is horrendously inaccurate. So do not base your professional judgment on these. Your interpretation should not be based on what it reads out. V1 and V2, P wave, QRS, T. Okay, pretty sloppy. This is actually kind of hard to read, which is okay. We can move on. It's inverted. Move on. Look at V2. So that's a P. This is QRS, right? And this is your T wave, right? So highlight this, and we can break this apart. So this is termination of the QRS, baseline. So again, V2 is depressed. V1 is depressed too, because your J point is somewhere in here. So it's a little depressed in there. V2 is definitely depressed. V3, absolutely depressed. V4, it's kind of sloppy, man. So V4 is actually probably okay. It's hard to see. It'll look, if you just go off of these, it's looking like you have some elevation here, but I don't believe you do. It's too inconsistent. Again, V5, V6, there's just too much movement. Get into high lateral, 1 and AVL. All right, let me get my highlighter right here. So 1 and AVL. QRS right here. And then this is your T wave. Okay, and again, QRS right here and T wave right here. So let's break it apart. Baseline, J point, depression, baseline, J point, depression. And then what sticks out hugely here is 2-3 and AVF, obviously. And again, bradycardia, right coronary artery. Not a big surprise there. All right, that's your P wave, QRS, T wave right here. Okay, so huge elevation, guys. Huge elevation. Huge elevation. And then AVF, again, huge elevation, right? So this is an inferior wall. Again, you got an inferior wall. Do your V4R. I'll give you a hint, because if you're looking to see if it does have right ventricular involvement, 60% of the time, if lead 3 has a larger elevation than lead 2, you have a 60% chance of right ventricular involvement. All right, but you should still do your V4R. Okay. All right, guys, that's the last EKG. Again, let's label this guy. I'll do this guy. This is an inferior wall. Make sure you run your 2-3 AVF just to confirm it. Probably, I'm going to say no nitro with this one. But I hope that helps. Keep practicing and take care.